Because in Africa, the churches are one of the biggest social, political, economic forces in many countries. In many countries, the institutions that best function are the churches, and particularly the Catholic Church, particularly in the French-speaking countries, especially in the last 20-odd years when so many other institutions have collapsed. The churches do maintain moral authority, structures, systems. They have a big following. So they are, in fact, one of the most important forces, institutions in society. I don't know whether anything would be absolutely unique, but one of the most obvious factors is that the churches play a role that they haven't played in Europe since the Middle Ages. For example, the schools that they run, the clinics, the health care, the development projects generally. Because other institutions have collapsed, the churches are left doing all sorts of projects, playing all sorts of roles that they don't need to play in developed societies. You're right, I try to cover all sections of Christianity, the mainline Protestants, the Catholics, the Africa independent churches, that's rather unique on the continent, the evangelical churches, the modern Pentecostals. The churches play different roles. For example, the Catholic Church is the most institutionalized, and it also has access to the most resources, so it's involved in the most development projects. The new Pentecostal-like churches don't do much by comparison in development, but they do make a lot of noise. They have a great following, and certainly they are pioneering new forms of Christianity. So they're playing a role, but it's a very different role from the Catholic Church. Well, that's the way I would understand the flourishing of Pentecostalism, that it is basically the persistence of the traditional religious worldview, the traditional religious imagination, which sees spiritual forces acting everywhere. Spiritual forces are pervasive, causing misfortunes of all sorts. And in a Pentecostal church, this worldview is given great stress. You can come there to have your misfortunes explained, have the spirit who's causing them identified, have that spirit cast out. And that's what you will not get in the Catholic Church. Well, for a great many, probably by far the most people in Africa, spiritual forces are the causes of virtually everything. Car accidents, misfortunes, if you fail your exam, if you get divorced, if your business fails, these things really are primarily to be explained in terms of spiritual forces. And why? Which spiritual force have I annoyed? Which spiritual force is angry with me? Which spiritual force is trying to tell me something? So I need help to have this spirit identified so that then he can be dealt with. It is, you're quite right, it's that way of thinking really has ceased to be of great importance in Europe for a couple of 100 years. Well, I think they have to be put in their context. Africa has been marginalized in the last 20 years, say, of globalization, and young men of talents, even some young women of talents, initiative, drive, gifts, many of them are led to start churches. And it is a very, very competitive business, and the people who actually run the most successful ones are extremely gifted individuals. And they preach well, the music is superb, very often the involvement And it's just the general gaiety, the exuberance, dressing up to go on a Sunday. They certainly reward your coming. You sing yourself hoarse. It's a total experience, and their appeal is obvious. Yes, you're right. They have great strengths. They do appeal to people, and they can give people hope and encouragement. In many cases, life is fairly difficult. So to have this experience on a Sunday can really set you up for the rest of the week. But I don't think they do a great deal to encourage critical thinking. I don't think they do a great deal to analyze the socio-political situation. If spirits are causing all the problems, it really lets the government away lightly, because rather than accuse the government, you may be prone to accuse spiritual forces. So I think the real problems of Africa, addressing the socio-political systems, and those issues are not addressed in these churches. And also, as I believe, what Africa needs to join the modern world are institutions. And these churches don't do a great deal for institution building in Africa. I don't think there's any sign of them becoming less important. They are changing all the time, of course. They're changing before our eyes. The gospel of prosperity, then deliverance. Even these things are receiving different expression every year. Things evolve, things change. They are not organized as one movement, and that is where I don't think they will ever challenge the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church is structured and it's organized, and it's can be directed at particular goals and so on. Whereas these churches do tend to split. They're in competition with one another. Cooperation does not come easily to these churches.